it's more of a gradual progress of things, but you have a big vision. Maybe that's it, the way to say that. You have a big vision, but you take small steps, and those small steps actually help you recalibrate and move, along the way where you're not, splitting the family apart and people are losing their mind. And she was just doing this on the side to teach the kids a little bit about business and so forth. It's part of our idea of curriculum. Frustrated me was, despite having all that great education, when you hit the workforce as a man, especially, it seems to really have little connection with all those years of study. And it just doesn't cut it. It's frustrating. You're disconnected from, I don't want to say identity. It sounds so dramatic. It's like you wind up working in a line of work. It's like, how did I even get here? I tell you, if you want to banish anxiety in a team, because they think you're snowballing them, they're like, of course you have to say that because you're obligated to love me. And they want proof that what they're doing in life or their impact on others starts having value and meaning.
Welcome, everyone, to the Revolutionary Man podcast. I'm the founder of The Awakened Man and your host, Alan DeMonso. How many times in life have you responded to the question, how are things going? By saying usually busy. Yeah, all of us have a definition of what busy looks and feels like. Let's remember, one person's idea of busy is another one's idea that there's still time in the day to get some things done. Well, let me tell you, that is what I thought when I kept telling myself I was busy running a side hustle, full-time job, working through ministerial training, and finding time to spend with my wife. Well, that all changed once I met today's guest. And now that he and his wife are up to is the epitome of what I think really being busy is all about. Now, before we're going to get into all that, I just want to remind you to hit like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform so you can stay up to date on our latest content, as well as helping me grow the Awakened Man message. With that, I just want to say I'm truly grateful. Now, let's get on with today's episode.
The average man today is sleepwalking through life, many never reaching their true potential, let alone ever crossing the finish line to living a purposeful life. Yet, the hunger still exists, albeit buried amidst his cluttered mind, misguided beliefs, and values that no longer serve him. It's time to align yourself for greatness. It's time to become a revolutionary man. Stay strong, my brother.
So, what is your definition of busy? And do you have time in the day to squeeze anything else into it? All of us are busy. There's no doubt about it. What makes a difference is in our busyness is where we put our priorities. And when that priority is in developing ourselves and our children, there can be no greater motivational power. Well, today's guest is going to share how he and his wife have done just that. So allow me to introduce him. Jonathan and his wife, Renee, own and operate a six-figure online business selling unique, handcrafted skincare products specifically for dry and cracked skin. And then starting from a simple farmer's market booth to then taking it online in a full e-commerce business. And on top of that, this amazing couple's raised 9 children along the way, teaching them not only the business skills and strategies to develop their marketable talents that earns them a sustainable income. This developed into a unique strategy they dubbed Parent Their Passion, and is meant to be a replica for other families to follow. Welcome to the show, Jonathan. How are things today?
Great. Thank you, Alan. After that introduction about busy or whatever, it's good. Like, oh my goodness, good thing I didn't say busy. Yeah, I'm actually out here. We were just talking. By the way, your lighting's fantastic. I'm out in California, and we're in the valley of California. People are familiar with it. Of course, there's mountains all around. Yeah. We're not on the coast where everybody takes the beautiful shots. We're in the valley. It's got its own beauty, and we're quite up at north. And we actually got our snow. We get snow about once every 4 years down in the valley. And so the kids are excited, but it is actually a wonderfully beautiful day out here. The sun is out, which means the snow is going to be gone by the end of the day, but nice. It is really, really nice. So
outstanding.
We're just enjoying our time and be busy. Yes, to a certain extent. And yesterday, every time that happens, there's a high chance that our power will go out. We're on the grid still. And then of course we run a business from home. So every time that happens, it's a little bit frustrating because we got emails to set out, things to check, but we've got to say, okay, this is a time for us to enjoy family time. And, the kids are going to go in and out, constantly interrupting us, doing the snowman. And of course, we're not really equipped for snow. So I think we did a pretty good job yesterday, actually enjoying our family time, taking that forced downtime.
Outstanding. Right on. Yeah, I'm in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, and we're actually going through a bit of a deep freeze. It was minus 28 or 29 this morning Celsius. So
Oh,
depending if we have wind chill, it could be in the minus 40 range, which is about the same. Actually, it's exactly the same in Fahrenheit. So it's pretty chilly here today. And that's just what you expect. We live here in the Great White North. And so we're pretty, we're getting a little bit older now. We're kind of thinking about maybe it's time to find a summer vacation, maybe California, Texas, Arizona, somewhere to go. But in our work here, Jonathan, at the Awakened Man, we always talk, everybody's on a hero's quest or a hero's journey. Most people, they'll define that by the different moments in their life. And it helps them to also focus on what changes in their course of their life that they have to make. So is there a moment in your life that you felt that you were led to, and where did that take you? And how does that shape to what the work you're doing today?
I think one of the big pivoting moments for us, and we probably had several small ones along the way, and that's also an idea too. Because sometimes when we make these big pivots, I know people who aren't used to doing the kind of stuff we're doing, they probably think, "Oh my goodness, this is how do you jump from something completely different than the norm?" But it is true that along the way we were doing things a little bit different, and I think this is part of the overall point too with what I'm going to share is that you don't do crazy leaps. I mean, sometimes you have to or you're forced to, but that's not the ideal. You're doing these little gentle jumps into something new, and as you become aware that you're somewhat successful at it, I think your boldness increases. You're not trying to do something crazy. And I think too with our own family, when we make these changes that I'm talking about, it's not like one day we're, I don't know what the example would be, but it's not like you're a slave in some mind and say, tomorrow I'm going to conquer, I'm going to go out and start attacking people and become a conquering hero. It's more of a gradual progress of things. But we have a big vision. Maybe that's the way to say that. You have a big vision, but you take small steps, and those small steps actually help you recalibrate and move, along the way where you're not, splitting the family apart and people are losing their minds. So for us, one of the big pivot directions for our family was in the last big recession in 2008. I got laid off. Well, I knew I was going to be laid off, and I was in the computer industry, and there were so many people in the same kind of role. Handwriting was on the wall, so I did get advance notice, and we had settled in a part of California that we really liked. It's in a small community. It's kind of a little bit of a Tom Sawyer, John Wayne area. And we didn't want to move because I knew what it would take. I knew all my colleagues who had stayed in the same field were telling me they had to be on the road 3 weeks out of 4 of the month, to be on customer sites and so forth. I was willing to do that. Actually, ironically, when you're young, you're full of like, yeah, this is great, But when you start having kids and you have a wife at home, you're like, that does not sound exciting. And my oldest at that time was around 12, and I can't remember if he was 13 or 11, but anyways, it was a transition time, and I knew we were going to hit the teens, and I'm like, it wasn't even so much that I was worried about if I'm not around for my teens, but I just want to be around for them. I mean, I want to be part of this exciting part of life. And so we decided to switch direction entirely out of necessity. So that wasn't, how do we stay in this community without having to move and be on the road and etc. And my wife had a particular skin problem that plagued her for years. Nothing critical, but annoying. And we had come up with a solution, a particular lotion that worked pretty well for her. And she was just doing this on the side to teach the kids a little bit about business and so forth. It's part of our idea of curriculum, But we realized, wait a second, why don't we take this full time? It was at the time when social media was just starting to take off, where bloggers were actually making money, the early days. And the power, they had tribes. So if people advertised or happy with it, we would get buyers. Well, that's exactly what happened to us. We say, let's see if we can go take this online. And so that's what we did. I cashed out my pension fund, or the 401k as they call that here. And we used whatever savings we have. And I mean, looking back on it, to be honest, like, it's like, wow, I told my wife, this is what we can do. I was like, I wanted her to be on board. I was like, are we going to do this? I was like, let's do it. And so we got our first sales it was and we, anyways, unknown to us, our product solved a particular problem, a particular type of community of people, and our sales started coming in. And then that's when we realized, well, we could turn this into an income just to be able to stay in the small community, because that's always a problem. I'm sure it's the same in Canada. You live in this beautiful area, but then it's like, okay, now how do I make a living?
Yeah.
So it's the same here. And that's what we did. So, and that's where we realized, well, we could even get more bold. Now, we were homeschooling already at that time, so it's not everybody's doing this here, of course, but it's popular enough that we weren't completely off the beaten trail. But what changed for us is we realized one of my frustrations, and I had a great educational background, so I don't complain about that. But what frustrated me was, despite having all that great education, when you hit the workforce as a man, especially, it seems to really have little connection with all those years of study. And it just doesn't cut it. It's frustrating. You're disconnected from your, I don't want to say your identity. It sounds so dramatic. It's like you wind up working in a line of work. It's like, how did I even get here? And you have no idea. And I did all these studies in this area. How does this even line up? So my desire was, I'm going to reverse engineer this thing. And I'm going to see if we can get our boys, specifically, I have mostly boys, to start developing a passion, an interest that is marketable. Okay, so that, going back earlier, is we have never been entrepreneurials of any way, shape, I mean, just like everybody, oh, wouldn't it be great someday we have our own business? But we didn't do anything about it. But this lotion thing, partly under necessity at that time, and then partly because we knew it was solving my wife's problems. And then my wife actually kind of got the bug. We did it in the farmers markets, the outdoor markets here, and she was sort of testing it with the customers. And tip, by the way, you won't make money really off the farmers markets, but it's a great way to test your product because you get that immediate feedback from customers. My wife loved it, and she'd probably describe herself as an introvert, and she just absolutely loved it. She loved taking our preteens at that time. They were going around handling samples, and so all that put together, our confidence went up. We didn't think I don't know, we weren't fearful, but we didn't think, well, like, can we even do this? And that's when our confidence started going up. It's like, why are we waiting for a company to tell us what to do, sitting by the phone? Let's start taking more proactive control, even over our kids' education. So up until then, we're homeschooling, and we're pretty eclectic, but we're still following, the concept of buckets. People don't use that word unless you're following education theory, but you have X amount of math, X amount of history, X amount of whatever that you're supposed to achieve at certain particular points in time. So you're pursuing these buckets. Yeah. Now, you some of it you realize as you get older is they're filling up the time, right? There's so much knowledge to memorize that you're like, why did they choose this? And honestly, I'm 100% convinced it's to fill up the time, or it's easier to grade. And I think as you become older, you realize, well, why can't we control some of that, the spending of time and acquisition of knowledge to actually support my son's long-term interest and passion, and make it marketable. I think this is really important, and make it marketable, because we had friends, and feel free to interrupt me here, because I just remember I had friends older than me, and their kids were actually starting to hit college, doing other things after high school. And I saw this time and time again. I mean, you have two extremes, right? You have one extreme where the families are falling apart, and there's going to be a different set of problems. And then you have the other extreme where you have families are pretty well put together, but they're overeducated in these areas. And once they leave the household, or where mom and dad are subsidizing things, all that stuff they do doesn't come to anything. Yes. And it's kind of demoralizing for the kids. I see a lot of young adults, I think they've got this borderline depression. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because they can't actually act on it. And it's very, very frustrating. So they're super good at violin. They're super good at you name it, but they can't find a way to support a family. They want to get married. Now they have to go back from scratch. And and they feel like they've been set back. So I wanted to reverse all of that.
Yeah,
That's what we did.
Yeah, absolutely. And that makes total sense. It's really, what I wanted to really have us spend some time talking about is because you're coming, you both you and your wife have come across raising child rearing and in the schooling aspect from a marketplace perspective versus strictly learning the 4 R's, right? Read, write, arithmetic type of deal. And I think it's so true. Unless you're planning to be a physicist at some point, how much more of this do you need? We need to teach our kids that have proper business skills, marketing skill, some sort of marketable skill that they can go out and actually do something that is and provide more value into the world. And so, what I wanted to know is before we get into all that is, so you're a father of 9, right? You guys run your own business. You have this family business. So what did you have to cut out to make all of this happen?
Well, some of it you have to cut out your pride, because every business owner will tell you, and that's the front part, right? So you have the visible part of the final product that you're selling or on the internet, and of course those are the pretty pictures, and we pay even photographers to take some of our stuff in addition to our own photography. But the behind the scenes is the unpacking of the boxes, the missing ingredients, the customer who got confused on their order, the tediousness. In fact, right now it's getting close to tax time coming up here in the United States, and you're it's just a lot of tediousness, and it's not fun. So there's the unfun part of any business. And so typically, if like you, if like a lot of people probably listen to this, if you're more of an employee status like I was for years, then your role is very, very defined if you're working with like a large company, right? If you're working at your desk and you're programming, whatever it is you're doing, you don't suddenly decide, hey, I'm tonight instead, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to go do a deep clean of the bathrooms. There's a whole janitorial service, and even if you wanted to, they probably would stop you because they're worried about liability or whatnot. When you're your own business person, you're the one doing the trash, you're the one doing all of that stuff. You become hyper aware of the chain of causation between the initial customer order to the final output and the marketing and so forth. And normally as an employee, your view of a business is it might be very specialized and deep in a narrow, but in a very narrow area. Mm-hmm. You don't see the service part, the whole service part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's humbling, because sometimes you might think, I didn't sign up for this, but when you realize, well, that's what brings in the money, boy, you're willing to hustle.
Yeah, when I asked that question, I wasn't expecting to hear pride, but it's so true, right? Because everything's your responsibility ultimately, in some way, shape, or form. Yeah. And as when you come in from you've spent your career as an employee, or we may be very specialized in a certain aspect, but we have this much of the whole spectrum. Like there's just a small piece that we're responsible for. And so when you become a business owner, and on top of that, you're homeschooling your kids in this whole process as well, pride is just something that just has to go to the wayside. So it totally makes sense. So let's talk about the homeschooling aspect and how you use that to shape your children's marketability. And then you guys use a term you use a term of hijacking the curriculum so they can create a powerful portfolio. Tell me what you mean by that, and what was the mission with this?
Well, I think it's because when you're doing traditional curriculum, and there's a whole, there's different styles and so forth. So, and we do use some curriculum. So it's not like we're anti-curriculum, but rather we're in control of the curriculum.
Yeah.
So here the idea is like, so typically, when you're thinking of writing, you want your kids to leave, your house being able to write somewhat decently, assuming they don't have, a true handicap. But if you just want them to be able to articulate themselves and communicate clearly, and I'm in agreement too. Everybody wants that. Mm-hmm. But when you get down to the details, typically you'll pick up a textbook, and they have a laundry list of all these things you should, quote, be able to do, and they're put together by committees, literally.
Mhm.
And so, and you get that feel. That's why nobody likes to pick up a textbook. It's like you're going through a laundry list, a grocery list of things to do. There's no one individual talks like that or communicate to you like that. Even if you were to meet the best writer you've ever known in the world, they wouldn't put this together.
Right.
So you're going on the idea that these are the things we need to achieve. And so in their mind, in the group teaching mind, in order to be able to most effectively, in the smallest amount of time, be able to get all these people from different backgrounds lockstep and communicating clearly in what they think is important, you're going to have selected essays, text, exercises telling you, redo this essay in the voice of the third person instead of the first person point of view, whatever it is. And so when you look at any of these things, you can think, oh, okay, well, they're all legitimate. I mean, it's not a bad thing to do. But the reality is you spend so much time as a student doing this. I remember, and maybe you did this too, is you wind up counting the words to meet. It doesn't even matter what you're saying anymore.
Oh man,
right? You're just trying to
shoulder.
cram it. Okay, I need 3 adjectives. She said that the teacher said I had 4 more adjectives. So you start just piling in the adjectives and then the subject. You're just trying to. You're they're not telling you it's wrong, but you feel like you're just like, I don't even care what I'm saying anymore. And this is the attitude that people have because you're also not focused on any subject.
Right.
Yeah. And in one moment you're talking about some, historical figure in history, which is legitimate. So I'm not saying these people aren't important, but you don't have anything new to say, and certainly nothing you can impress your teacher with. So your parents are never asking to read your essay. I don't think my parents have ever asked, like, hey, I heard you wrote a story on Napoleon. Could I read it? Like, no way. No one's going to ask you because you're not knowledgeable enough. You don't write well enough. It's very stilted. And that's why typically people don't like to keep their essay. And this is all normal as far as like the learning process.
Yeah.
But the problem is I think your mind purges that over time. But what happens if you could learn to write, but you're always writing as much as possible around a subject material that you're interested in?
Mm.
And then that's really where we found that our kids' writing kind of took off that way. So a lot of times they won't necessarily have the terms down in terms of how what they're doing from a writing perspective, but they're doing it. And we found that if you start writing, get them to write about their ongoing interest or passion, that they start wanting to express themselves very, very clearly. So in practice, your kid will start writing about a subject and they're not clear. And so I'll look at it later and it's like, I'm confused here. It sounds like you have 2 thoughts going on at the same time, which is a typical thing. And it's like, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. So they'll go back, rewrite it a little bit, disentangle the thoughts. And then you repeat this process over time. And I'm not there. And I was probably more aggressive in my younger years with the younger kids about, hitting all the grammar mistakes and stuff like that. But I backed off a bit on that. Actually, my wife likes to do that stuff. And over time, because they're so passionate about what they're trying to communicate, they want the details to be clear, which is the whole point of writing. Mm-hmm. So you look at all these exercises in these textbooks. At the end of the day, they're hoping you can take this basically into the workplace or with your friends and your family and be able to put together a sentence where you're not mixing thoughts and you have a conclusion and blah, blah, blah. Well, this is exactly what you're doing when you're writing about something that you're passionate about, because you want to be clear to other people. So as you're writing, you're opening the doors with other people in the same field, whether they're your peers or maybe people just a little bit older than you, or you're in these specialized forms. They'll start gently correcting you. It's like, well, I think what you mean is this, and they say, oh yeah. So they learn all these subtleties of the language, even down to the social skills. Typically you got a teen starting to talk, and then we allow them eventually to go into these specialized forms where they'll be talking about technical stuff or whatever it is. As every parent knows, they're a little too casual with people quite a bit older than them. And we'll have to say, you know what, it's John, it's not John for you, it's Mr. Walters to you. Everybody else is calling him John because they're on the same level, plus it's a professional thing. And so you subtly teach them the the etiquette of
Yeah.
communication, right? And it gets really interesting because one of the first things you do when you get in the workforce is you quickly abandon this idea of here's my 4 supporting arguments and my conclusion at the bottom. You'll get an angry email from your boss saying you need to put your conclusion at the top. They don't say that. They'll say get to the point.
Yeah.
And then I'll decide if I think I have time to read your arguments. I mean, this is like a complete reversal. There's all those things like that you learn in life, depending who you're talking to.
Yeah.
Well, when you're talking and writing, and that's what we do our kids, it's like, okay, in the beginning, it's like, if you're going down this road of developing this interest. So we have one kid right now who's 14. So, this is a prime 14-year-old boy with all this snarkiness of a 14-year-old and passion and interest. He's into 3D printing. A lot of people are into 3D printing right now.
Yeah.
Awesome focus to have to learn about mechanics and engineering. I mean, I don't know how many 3D printers he has right now because they cannibalize the parts from things, and there's always some torque thing going on and delay and melting point, and I don't know, it's over my head on this thing. But he writes about this and he gets super excited. He goes in these forums, and a lot of these guys are from engineers from Germany or something. He's learning how to communicate, and it's very, very passionate. And he wants to get the words right because they'd say, what do you mean? Do you mean this or that? Do you mean this or that?
Right on.
And he posts it online. He writes in the forums. All of our kids, even we have one child that was just academically struggled with communication skills, period, just like you would, some kids do. I'm actually genuinely surprised, and this is my daughter, so hopefully she's not listening to this, but her communication skills are really good written. I don't, and I think it's because we put her in so many situations. She was really into horses, typical teen interest, and you learned quickly that if you're not clear as to what you were intending to do, how much commitment you had to scoop the poop out of the stalls, or what you were going to do, or they told you to do this, but that people get very testy about their animals. People with money and animals love their horses, and you better respect them. And you learn very quickly to be clear. And in the normal course of interaction, sometimes you underpromise, overpromise, you're vague, and they get angry or push back, and they'll say, well, honey, that's because it wasn't clear that you were actually committing to or not, because it sounds like this. And it's like, oh, I get it. And so they learn the subtleties of the language. And all this to say is that I honestly feel achieving the goals of that textbook are achieved by pursuing hotly a passion and interest in the teen years, and communicating about it. Not just, so you're starting to learn how to serve other people by being clear to them. That's one of them. You're not writing for yourself, you're writing for other people. And so you could say, well, why not just stick with the textbook, and why bother with this writing on the side? Well, the difference is that with a textbook, at the end of your high school years, you have nothing original that you wrote. It's all regurgitated stuff. I don't care if you have an essay about Napoleon, it's still not original because you haven't had enough depth or personality to insert into it. But if you do this on the stuff that you're passionate about, when you're consistent, so you're not bouncing around, but you're consistent, yes, you will have a portfolio by the time you leave. Your personality will start emerging, even though you're not the top of the field in that thing. You already have certain insights, certain appreciation of the difficulties that even some of the experts haven't experienced. So when you walk away from high school, you are brimming with articulate thought and words in that field, and it comes across. I mean, I that was my desire. But I will say, I cannot tell you how many times I have been told by my young adults that they've been in professional circles and so forth, where people were astonished at how young they were. And I know what it is because I've seen them actually, and I'll come around and they're all 4 of them are living out of the house, and they're looking at people in the eye. They know what to say. They've stumbled over those mistakes and those words and those way of introducing themselves hundreds, thousands of times before they even leave the house. And that's revolutionary because I was an extrovert, and I didn't have difficulty really inserting myself into social circumstances. But there's no way I was as bold as my children are, and that's not because they're extroverts.
Well, you've given them a skill set. What my takeaway from hearing you speak, Jonathan, is that what you guys have done is taken the curriculum and put it into a place that actually gives them meaning, that the kids actually have meaning towards practicing what it is that,
Because they had mastery. Yes, it absolutely is that. And it's a small thing. So when we go back to, I'm not asking them to suddenly stand on a stage in front of 10,000 people, make or break. It's nothing to do with that.
No.
It's just a gentle going on. Like a lot of times we'll start if we get the kids to write 2 or 3 sentences, maybe on a favorite YouTube channel of a particular interest. There's a lot of wonderful people out there who put themselves on the line, what they're doing daily in a particular field. Mm-hmm. And we'll just summarize what they're saying, be 2-3 lines. And then as they get, it's like, well, tell me a little bit more about it.
Yeah.
And it's just this gentle, it's organic.
Yeah.
Your child comes alive. And one of my favorite parts as a father is when they get to the point, whatever subject material it is like, they'll ask me, what do you think? It's like, honestly, I don't know. This is above my pay grade. I really don't know. I think you should research this and find out.
Yeah.
And that, I love that part because I know they're making this tremendous progress, and their sense of confidence.
Yeah.
I tell you, if you want to banish anxiety in a teen, they're at that stage. And I
yeah,
when they're young, there's definitely, I believe there is that definite nurture stage, right? Mm-hmm. Where, they draw a snowman that looks like a stick figure and everything. And he's like, you're encouraged. I guess this is great, but when they're 13, you cannot tell them that. It's not appropriate. In fact, they start getting angry because they think you're snowballing them. They're like, of course you have to say that because you're obligated to love me. And they want proof that what they're doing in life or their impact on others starts having value and meaning. And it's a legitimate desire. The problem is that sometimes what they're doing has no value. So yeah, you get this teen gnawing on their bones or being reckless or depressed. It can go in both directions.
Yeah.
You start giving them something where they're making a difference, and it's not a huge difference necessarily. It's a small difference, but it's genuine.
Yes.
Then they start coming alive. They start staying up late at night trying to figure out how they could do it better next time.
Well, you've been able to tap into that passion part, right? And that's why it's so successful. The work that you're doing, you and your wife are doing, is that you've taken the key of these textbooks, and you've actually been able to decipher what's really the lesson. And the lesson in some of these ones, the one we're talking about right now, is really about critical thinking, and then how to communicate that. And why do that on a topic like Napoleon or something that, like, let's face it, I don't think I read one book in school. And at the time, at one point in my life, I had married my high school sweetheart, and I actually had her write my book reports because she could read like the Dickens. And so, I'm old enough now, I can admit that. Can't take my grade away. But I didn't really learn how to critical think until much later in life. And it's too bad because it really shortchanged my 20s, right? Whereas you're giving your kids the skill right from the get-go. And the other part I really like about what you're saying, Jonathan, is really meeting them where they're at. Yes, when they're really young and they're drawing a snowman and it's a stick figure, you can praise that. But when they're a little older, they can see all the BS. They know when we're being authentic or not. And so being able to meet them where they're at, where they're really looking for guidance, and you're providing that, in as nurturing a way as possible, just elevates their not that they don't have respect for us as parents, but I just think it takes that depth of love and appreciation because we are saying we care enough about you to tell you the truth.
Absolutely.
So powerful,
absolutely. Man. And in fact, if if you have a lot of fathers on here too, as I think sometimes, you'll connect. Well, I have lots of children, so I get the privilege of actually seeing lots of different personalities. And it is true what people say, your children are not clones of yourself. And, obviously they're family traits. I mean, that's pretty clear. But in terms of like personalities, it's, you got one personality figured out, then there's the next one coming up. And whereas one needs to be kicked out of bed to be motivated with a cup of cocoa, then another one says like, stand down, give me my keys back. They're like a shot of, each one is so different. And I will have to say that the older they get, and I hope, especially if you're starting the teens, sometimes it seems murky exactly because honestly the teens are confused half the time too. They got these brilliant thoughts and these stupid thoughts, mixed in together. It's like, but you see these personalities developing, and when they get really good at something, even if you're like, that's not your inclination to be interested in that subject, you as a person, it's still you admire and almost fall in love with the stuff because their passion and the reasons why they like it is being communicated to you as an individual, not as a father, as it's like when you meet someone super passionate about something. And I'm not into surfing, but I'm sure if I met a guy who rode big waves and he told me these stories, I'd be mesmerized. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You'd be, and that's what happens with your teens as they get really good at something. You stand in awe because at some point they cross over from that stick figure to an actual. How did you draw this? I can't. I mean, I get it technically, but how do you pull that off? And it's like, oh, this is like it's normal.
Yeah.
And so you realize, man, there's so much potential here. And we haven't talked to this part, but you're like, I want to see that. Wouldn't that be amazing if they could support themselves by doing something that they love doing and so good? And a lot of times when you see people really good at it, you might be trying to cram it in as much as you can because those teen years are disappearing, and then they got to go hit McDonald's or whatever, or they're going to go sign up for college, but they still don't know what they really want to do in life.
Yeah.
And you think it's going to disappear, or you have an intuition it's going to.
Yeah.
But you can actually, again, hijack all of that stuff and say, instead of letting it disappear like a mist in the morning, we're going to turn it. We're going to crank it up because you have real knowledge, real depth, but you need to be able to use it to serve other people. And so if people are nervous, moms are usually more nervous about the idea of making money than dads are. Dads are like, I'm out here sweating, let's make some money. And the mom's like, they're still in this nurturing mode, which is okay.
Yeah.
But you're thinking nurture's not going to cut it once you're out there,
Yeah.
And so I think there's a combination of both. You do need, and pop culture is correct. You can't live off of passion alone. That is absolutely true.
Yeah.
You need to have a hardcore skill set.
Yeah.
And this development of the skill set is actually going to create the passion. So you may have a small interest, but kids have tons of interest.
Absolutely.
But when you start matching it with a real skill set that you can figure out to bring value to other people, I mean, it is a virtuous loop. I mean, so can you imagine if you're doing art or you're doing like 3D printing, but now you start, other people are saying, hey, can you help me with this? Somebody not in your family.
Yeah.
Somebody doesn't owe you an attaboy or a cute compliment, but genuinely this really helped. That will feed that development.
Yeah.
For your teens to want to get good in areas that they were never interested in. That's pretty typical. So if you have a teen who's got an interest, they like all the glory and the fun stuff up front, right? But then if they're trying to serve other people, there's a lot of stuff in the background, like taking out the trash, that needs to be done.
Yeah.
In order to deliver that value. And it could be as simple as, they like your music, but they don't like it on you need to show up in the early morning to get this set up, or you need to be, instead of being able to participate with the rest of it, you need to be cleaning up the drums and the stuff like this. It's all that nitty gritty.
Yeah.
That's actually going to turn it into a marketable talent.
100%.
And when they realize that, if you want to get to that glory aspect of it, you're going to have to take out the trash, the equivalent of whatever that is. They surprise themselves at how much some of those tasks they like more than they thought, because it's so intimately tied with the production of their talent for others, that they actually fight you less on it once they understand the connection, and it's organic. And some things you can't do, and yeah, you say, okay, I want to make more money in that area so I can pay someone else to do it, and that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, but at least they get a chance to explore the whole spectrum now, right? And because it's tied to the passion, then they adopt it better, because it's not,
Yes.
it doesn't seem to be as much of a burden anymore, as it's just part of the process, right? And so
Yes.
you've really been able to tie that in. Now, one of the other things that you've developed is this 5 pillars for developing their talents. And so I think we've started to kind of touch into that, but we haven't really maybe articulated it. So tell us what they are and how parents can use them.
So when we talk about the 5 pillars now, what really the important part here is merging. So I believe a lot in merging, pillars, merging, and looking at your own environment to find that sort of unique talent that you could create in your child. So really, when I say you, I mean you as the parent, because you're guiding them, right? You gotta allow them that, you gotta open the doors for them, but you're not doing it yourself, right? So make that clear. They're still young, and of course, as they get older, they become more and more independent on their own, which is ideally what you want.
Yeah.
But when they are young and they're a teen, a lot of times they'll have lots of interest, or they're not really sure what their interests, but you as a parent can see that, maybe they think, oh, I want to become a race car driver. And really you realize, knowing your young teen, that what they're really like is anything mechanical. They like to take it apart, put it back together again. The only reason they said race car driver is because the next door neighbor has a collector's car. He likes to go help, and the guy always has race cars on the TV. But you've never really seen him interested in speed or whatever. But so that's where you as a parent can see sometimes much deeper, especially at a younger teen. It's like, okay, he really likes things mechanical. He seems to have an aptitude. He doesn't get impatient. So those are those things that we as parents see, but he might have a lot of interest. And then what you want to do, so that's one aspect, right? So you got one. Then you look at your family's environment and you say, well, could he develop this interest further instead of just watching YouTubes about it? Is there a way he can actually practically get involved in it? And that's when you look at your circle of friends, your family environment. Of course, as the older he gets, then you can look at him driving, getting his car, going places where you're not as worried for his physical safety and so forth. But when they're younger, you're really going to look at your immediate family social circle, and you're going to see if there's an opportunity for him to, like in that example, maybe there is an older guy that has a couple of collector's car. He's got the tools, got the time and the patience, and he doesn't mind having a young teen handing him tools and talking about his glory days. Well, then that's an example of, now you've taken what was an interest. Maybe he likes this on YouTube, and he's just got a couple of things that he likes to put together at his hobby table. But what happens if he could actually spend some hours or time next door with old George working on it? So now you've got this interest. Now you're starting to put tools and social connections on top of that.
Yeah.
And then the next thing you want to do is you want to look at, is there a way that he can start bringing value to other people? So that's where it gets really interesting, because that's when the pivoting starts. A lot of times, the young teen will say something like, yeah, I'm going to go and I'm going to apply to this, NASCAR race. I'm going to go work in the pits. And I'm like, well, okay, that's complete fantasy. So what you need to do is help them say, well, is there anything we could do meanwhile locally, where somebody would allow you to touch their car, first of all, because somebody actually has one of those nifty cars. They're not going to let you touch them. And you might help them see that, well, maybe we could volunteer to check you can go in the neighborhood and say, I'd like to check your oil, I'd like to fill it up, doing some very practical things. I'm thinking off the cuff here, and mechanics is not my thing, so I'm realizing I may have chosen the wrong analogy. But the point is that you find
looking for value.
yeah, you find an aspect where they can start serving other people with that skill set. But it has to be very practical. And it could be like, okay, he tried, but people are hemming and hawing, not giving him an answer. And this is where you, as an adult, this is beautiful. As an adult as well, they're probably not saying yes or giving you a vague answer because they're worried that you're going to smudge the side of their car or that you're going to scratch it, but they don't want to tell you that. So, is there something we could do to remove that fear from them? Okay, so what is it? And you see it in these fast in these fast oil changes. What did they do? They put, what I think they do now is they, at least in our area, they put these sort of magnetic strips to protect the side because they have a lot of people coming and going, don't know what they're doing. So this reduces the chances of it getting scratched. So you say, well, maybe we could buy a mat. It's only like, I don't know what it would cost, $20. I have no idea. And now that's his tool. So can you imagine a 12 or 13-year-old who's really passionate? Now he's showing up at maybe a car meet, and he's got, normally only a couple of guys will let him do it. They think it's kind of cute, but they're not letting him touch their very expensive one. But he's doing that. He's developing a personality. He's learning. And like, oh shoot, what do I do with the discarded oil? What do I do? Now he didn't think about that, right? So now maybe you need to have a portable something. So now he's building his own tools. He's investing. He's learning how to approach people. He doesn't just open the hood. He learns how to then he figures maybe I need to wear one of those mechanic jumpsuit type things, so that I look more official, And so you develop this stuff, and this opens the doors to maybe the collector or car collectors community or the mechanics community, and he's bringing real value. He's not just doing stupid stuff. He's not just gawking. In his own small way, he's developing the skills to socially access the higher levels in that little small world. And that's really what you're trying to do. So in the beginning, you might just do this on a no cash basis, or just the fact that you're allowed to be in the group. And then you figure out, well, how can I make some money off of this? And one of the guys tells him, you know what, changing the oil is great and everything, we'll let you do that, but really, here's the inside scoop. What we really need is this. And we would probably let you do that at your age if you were to learn to do this. And that's where you find the next level up in your field. And that's how you stack these things. So you're staying within your family's resources, you're staying within the circles, you're staying within your kid's personality. It turns out, and as your child is working through this, they're discovering what they do or don't like, or what they're willing to push through. And as we talked about earlier, you're still aware that you want them to learn to communicate, right? You don't want just a tradesperson. You want somebody who's very articulate. And so you say, why don't we blog about this, your first experience? And this is the mistake I made. And the next day, and then you put a photo up, and then you ask, can I take a picture of you or the guy and the thing? And this is what I learned, and et cetera. And I learned that you can't just have these oils, you need to have 5 different oils. And this is why. And you develop that. You're still doing the reading, writing, arithmetic, but you're doing it in the context of a world, and you're still using your textbooks if you need to, as we do, but you're always using this to support your child's talent, which is also becoming marketable.
Love that. Just love that. How that just everything is so well tied together, and because really what you're focused on is that ultimately being able to, come out of this curriculum, we'll call it the curriculum, and being able to go out and be able to survive and thrive in the world. And while there's lots of kids still staying at home in their 20s and even into their 30s, the challenge is that they may not be in an environment where they're learning how to market themselves and develop critical thinking skills and be able to, and marketing skills. Because really what you're also talking about is you're really helping them learn how to market themselves and put themselves out there. And in order to learn those skills, you have to be in it and doing some work. You're not going to learn it from reading a book. You have to actually go out and the adage of fail fast, right? Just keep moving forward.
Exactly.
Growing, and then you start to figure things out. And because you've been working them through at such a young age to to help to articulate and think those processes through. The learning, I would imagine, that learning curve is just while it's still steep, it's not as high and it's not as long because they've got some.
Yeah, and you can develop. It doesn't. One of the things too is that you might think that means you're not interested in, quote, the traditional academic side of this field, but actually you could see that it could potentially open that up for your child. So
Sure.
it's just in that simple example of you're coming up with, a bottle of oil, a canister of oil, and the guy's like, whoa, what grade is this, and so forth. And then you're, as a child, you're like, well, people are actually sensitive. It's not a theory. Like, people don't want this particular type and this particular type of car. So they're going to tell him, so like, hey, young man, this is not appropriate, and then they tell you why. This is what happened back in 1946. This is what happened. We were out in the blah blah blah. So you get these stories tied with it, but he can go back and you'll find some kids, and this goes back to our personalities and interests, might be very interested in the scientific part of it. So it may mean that he really gets into it, starts researching the oils. He's got 50 different grades. He gets into the science of it. And then you, as a parent, this is where, again, it goes back further. So you may decide, and we did this with one child, not with oil, but in a particular subject, where you can find a textbook on just about any narrow topic. And usually, sometimes they're graduate level or they're very specialized books. But you could probably find all about the science of fluids, mechanics for cars, specifically in oils, and there's probably all sorts of chemistry and physics involved, and I don't know, stuff related to torque and heat. You can indulge massively and develop the sort of what we call the typical science side of it, but it's tied in with real world experience.
Yes.
And that's interesting. So you may decide, oh, this is only for people who want to do trades, right? So I chose, and that's a whole other thing there we could talk about if we have time. I chose a well-defined kind of like, oh, I get the mechanic idea. There's a guy down my street who's a mechanic. He wears a particular suit and does this and this. Okay, so it's a very defined skill set. You might not even say it's a talent. You just say it's a job, and that'll get interesting there. But when you look at, like, if somebody even want to go down more into the science, like, what I'm really into, I'm actually passionate about fluid mechanics, and at some points, like, I want to go to college and I want to specialize in this, in this field, which is a field. He's coming in with real world knowledge, and I've met engineers like that where they started in the early years working on machinery. So by the time they get into these specialized classes, it's not an academic knowledge only. They have like stories and people they've met, and they've gotten their hands dirty. They see things explode, catch on fire, whatever it is. So when they're going in, they are primed to not only take in the information, but to come up with new ideas and new situations, as compared to the person who's just only had academic knowledge.
Yes.
So it's not like it's an either or. It's like you're setting your child up. Can you imagine his portfolio going in, applying to a college that specializes, right? Not randomly, but and he shows him his portfolio of thousands of pictures working with guys, and what we were talking about in this fictional example. He's going to go in. He's going to go in and say, okay, this is a guy who's passionate, who's seen it, he's been there. That's exactly what you want to create. So you're creating this sort of living portfolio. It allows you to pivot in any number of directions.
Yeah.
And it's super dynamic. You're having conversations with your kids. So it doesn't mean you don't have to even do what you call traditional stuff. It means that you're in control. So I think we had one daughter, again, that was the same one, just a lot of academic difficulties as far as stuff, but she loved horses. And so we're, one of the stuff, biology, state of California wants to do some biology. It's very vague as to what it would be. And there's so many things. So we've got, I woke up one day and was like, of course, there's got to be a biology anatomy of horses. Yeah. You go online. It's a graduate course on biology and whatever. You order it and it's super cheap. She loved it. She loved it. Talked about muscles and all sorts of stuff because she was in that world, and it was a really good fit for her to do that. So that's an example. We did do a traditional textbook in that one specific example, but it was because it was serving her.
Yes.
And so you a lot of things that in her example, she would have had a tremendous amount of anxiety about that. But because this was something for her to understand better
Yeah.
what she was into, that anxiety was pretty much gone. And it was just a matter of, plowing through it, getting into it.
Yeah.
And that's what you're doing for your teen, is you as the parent are clearing this way. Now, they might eventually figure this out on their own when in their 20s. And everybody's like, why did I take this degree? I don't even like this work world at all, because no one really engaged them early enough to say, let's wrestle with this, because the reality of any kind of work that you're going to do, there's going to be blood, sweat, and tears along the way. So you got to decide, is this worth it? And sometimes you say, yes, it's worth it. And then you can go full throttle.
Yeah, I hear you. Absolutely. It sounds like, and you alluded to that, maybe you have 9 children, maybe some of them are motivated, some of them might not be, but what would you tell the father out there, the parent who has an unmotivated child? What would you advise them to do in order to get them motivated?
If you have a truly unmotivated child, and we had one who gave me some difficulty, he started complaining, and he says his blogging, he's like, I always am right about what you learned. Did you learn anything? No. Did you fail at it? It's like, even if you failed, I want you to write why you failed, and you still don't have the answer. You love to have the answer. So they started whining and complaining about it, and he was an older teen at that time, and I was like, and I know he had his potential, so I said, okay, I think what's happening here is you're not challenged enough, which is not what my kids want to hear. But in this case, he truly was not challenged enough. So why don't we do a video blog instead of a writing blog? Now, if any of you have teens, that's usually not what a teen wants to hear. They don't want their face on camera, and they're very self-conscious, which is understandable. And he bought into it. He's like, you're gonna have to do something, because like, I don't want to do anything. I was like, that's not an option. I'm still your father. I see the potential in you. So I thought, you know what? Let's do a video blog. So on his own, then once he started wrapping his mind around that idea, I said, well, I'll do a challenge. I'll do 100 videos, and I don't know, I forget. It was like 3 videos a day for a couple of minutes, 5 minutes each. And I was like, when he first told me that, I was like, my reaction was like, you can't do that. You're going to fail. But I kept my mouth shut. I was like, okay, this is interesting.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay. All right. Let's see you do this. And lo and behold, he started doing his first videos out of my sight, lock the door, put the camera on. And I forget what he did exactly, but I think he was reading some books on business. He's into business. And he started doing summaries or insights, kind of like this self-help ideas. And one of the first ones are so cringe. I think I watched maybe a few seconds. I can't watch this. This is like too painful.
Yeah.
And I think he was sitting down in front of the camera, and he's kind of monotone. And but he posted that on an Instagram, a dedicated Instagram account, which I wouldn't have been able to stomach that at his age, but he did that.
Right on.
And then he realized, man, I look bad. So he did a quick search on YouTube or something like so one of the suggestions is like stand instead, so you get a little more energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so he tried doing that, but then he started flailing his arms way too much. And when he replayed it, he could tell that. He's like, okay, I look stupid. So then they told him what to do, and little by little, and I think the last few days of his 100 video challenge, within like, I don't know, a couple of months, it was some crazy thing, 3 a day. He never gave up. I told my wife, I don't know if he's going to be able to make it, but I didn't want to tell him that. He made it. He was so proud of himself. And to this day, that's what he does now for a living. He's pretty much a salesperson. He's actually a product, what does he call himself? An efficiency expert. No kidding. Wow. But I attribute it to those days where he pushed himself doing something that he thought he wouldn't be able to do. Wow. And I had to get into his face because I saw his potential. I says, okay, you're whining and complaining about your blog. It's too easy. It's boring. I'm like, what's the next level up from a blog? A vlog. And he did that, and after he did those 100, he stopped because I can't do 3 a day. It's just way too emotionally draining. And but now that's what he does for part of it. What he does for a living is putting himself out there physically in many different ways, and he pretty much has no fear. To be honest, I'm astonished. I mean, that level of no fear, um, uh, astounds me. And he's 19.
Wow.
But he wasn't like born with that per se. I think we gave him a chance and a space to be able to push himself. So it's not, I don't want to even say explore, because sometimes it was exploring, but sometimes it's the idea that you're sort of lackadaisical about it. It's like, I wonder if I'm into public speaking, and you kind of show up at the lake club, you're kind of like, no, you never even really tested it. You never really put yourself out there, and you never created a space where you could actually test it, because of course no one's going to want to, if you put on a stage, come and listen to me talk for an hour, no one's going to come, and they shouldn't come. You have nothing to say. But could you put up a 2-minute clip that maybe your friends or, yeah, you probably could, but it's definable. And if you can cross that bridge, it's amazing what it does to the psyche of a teen. It's like gives them superpowers, to be able to go to the next level. If you wait too long, they're not going to try that typically on their own. At that point, they're going to go back into the college mainstream. No one's going to ask you to do that. They're going to want you to do the public speeches in a traditional classroom on a topic you're not really interested in.
Yeah.
I mean, some good can come of it, but it's way less efficient than doing what I'm talking about.
Oh yeah, 100%. I completely agree with that. Well, Jonathan, this has been such a phenomenal conversation, and I just wanted to say that I really appreciated all the work that you and your wife are doing. But maybe there's something that we haven't talked about, and if we haven't, what would be the one thing you'd want as a takeaway you'd want our listeners to remember from our conversation?
I would really want to encourage parents to understand that their own family's culture is going to be different than all the other families around you. That includes your friends. And if you don't know, you know what I mean, ask your friends. It's like, how would you describe our family? Guaranteed they're going to say something about you and your family. They're going to nail it on the head, right? I mean, hopefully they'll be honest with you. It's like, oh, you're the family that you're the hiking family, or you're the reading family, or you're the party family, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's something about your family that other people are going to say that's kind of like your collective identity. And of course, it's usually the parents who are driving that, but the kids are in it too.
Sure.
If you understand that is a powerful asset on your hand, because I know a lot of times if parents are discouraged, you're doing all this, you're working late, you have to put food on the table, you got a lot of things going, you feel like your family has nothing special about it. That is not true. If you can come to terms what it is, you can use that as a leverage, as a powerful boost to your child's future. And if you go to my website, parenttheirpassion.com, there's a free download of a worksheet that's going to explain to you what I mean by that. And if you understand that your child, no matter what they are, artist, accountant, mechanic minded, some crazy inventive peculiarity of one child, they can use your family's culture, which has nothing necessarily to do with their interest, to actually boost that interest. And it's amazing because you don't have to have any money. And of course, if you have money, you can use that too. But you're not dependent on some faraway idea that some other family has that you don't have. And I want people to be able to see that, because that is also going to give a particular flavor to your child's talent that makes them stand out from everyone else. Right? You don't want to just be a mechanic. We didn't get a chance to get into that, but you want to be a talented mechanic, which has a very different connotation to it.
Yeah.
It's the same with your child. That part of that talent flavor is going to come about much sooner if you're able to tap into your family's existing culture. You're not going to create a new one. You're going to tap into it. So if you go to their website, download that free self-discovery worksheet, I'm hoping that will become pretty clear now, how to show you step by step how to identify it and then how to merge it with your child's interest.
Outstanding. Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm going to make sure that parentthepassion.com will be in the show notes, and people have an opportunity, as well as all the links to your socials with your other business. I just want to say thank you so much for spending time with me today. And really, what you're telling us is that it's how to use our current family's uniqueness to develop our children's marketable skills so that they can get out there and make great changes in the world. And I just want to say once again, thank you so much for being on the show. It was outstanding.
Thank you for listening to the Revolutionary Man podcast. Are you ready to own your destiny? To become more the man you are destined to be? Join the brotherhood that is the Awakened Man at theawakenedman.net and start forging a new destiny today.